have our greenhouse, which is our what we call our think and do tank, and where we kind of build out a lot of partnerships and projects. And then we have our community, which is really all of you. And earlier this year, we wanted to create some new programming for our broader community, to bring them together, bring everyone together to learn about some topics that are important as part of a movement for care, and to begin to kind of create more connections within that community. And one of those initiatives is our town halls. So welcome to our third town hall. Really thrilled to have you all here and to have our guests who have a very kind of full schedule. So I'm going to hand it off to them pretty quickly. But as we kind of say that our mission is to support a movement for care, and movements need organizing. And so we were really lucky to be connected with Pedja Stojicic and Sam Gonzalez at People Power Health, through some partners and collaborators at the Leading Change Network, where we've been trying to learn more about organizing. And they very graciously offered to take us through a collective exercise today, so that we can all learn a little bit more about organizing and then think about what it might mean for the patient revolution. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sam and Pedja, and we're really just thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Maggie. And hi, everyone. My name is Sam. I'm currently Director for Health Advocacy at People Power Health, and it's such a pleasure to be here. And I will give just a moment for Pedja to say hi.
Hi, and my name is Pedja Stojicic, and I'm calling in from Melrose, Massachusetts. I'm an Executive Director of People Power Health with Sam.
Thank you, Pedja. Okay, so let's start with our session today. The goals that we have for today are basically three main goals. We want to share how to approach organizing by building people power. Our second goal for today is how can we think like activists and as community organizers. And finally, we'll be sharing the general idea of the 5 basic community organizing practices and a small invitation on how to go deeper on them. And this is our agenda for today. We will have a space for introductions. Then we'll be sharing a couple of stories in the main room and in breakout rooms. Then we will work with a story that probably you had the opportunity of checking, which is the story about the rock. And then we'll be working with a scenario that will allow us to think as organizers and to have a small teamwork activity. We'll finally have some key takeaways, debrief, and closing of the session. And the first activity that we are going to do is called See Me As. I will be sharing an example, and then I will be asking for people to share that same example through the chat. So this activity allows us to see each other more than just a title or a profession, but as human beings. So having said that, hi, my name is Sam, and please see me as a physician, as a Latino, and as the proud uncle of 2 small kids that are back in Mexico. And I will pass it on to Pedja to share another example, and then I will ask people to use this model and write in the chat.
Thank you, Sam. So my name is Pedja. See me as an activist, a father, a doctor, and sometimes intellectual pessimist and action optimist.
Thank you.
And yeah, back to everybody else.
Thank you, Pedja. And let's give a moment. I would love to see the chat and see people sharing. And I may call 1 or 2 people from the chat and see how people share. Let's see. Let's give a moment for people to think about how they want to be seen in this room. And taking a look at the chat. And Shayla, could you please share your message with us, with your voice?
Thank you, Sam. I'm Sheila Maroney, and please see me as a passionate champion of meaningful care for all, no matter who you know or what your background is. Careful and kind care is my idea of nirvana.
Thank you, Shayla. Amazing. Let's see. Okay, Victor, could you please share with us?
Yeah, Victor Montori, see me as an overwhelmed scholar, but passionate activist, pivoting to the next phase in our movement.
Amazing. Thank you, Victor. Jennifer, please.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Okay. Mine is see me as a mother, a caregiver of a child with an eating disorder and autism, an advocate, a speech language pathologist, and a clinical researcher who cares about patient and family well-being.
Amazing. Thank you. And let me see. Reshma, can you share with us?
Yeah, so I wanted to keep mine short and sweet. See me as a mother, family leader, compassionate human being. So that covers all the realms of life.
Amazing. Thank you, Reshma. And let's see, Rita, please.
See me as an advocate nurse, still working in Lebanon despite all challenges, and also a proud aunt for 3 amazing nieces.
Amazing, Rita. Thank you. And it's so nice to hear your voice. And let's hear one more here. Jan, could you please share yours?
My name's Jan West, and please see me as a lifetime activist for care and peace. Mother, grandmother, and advanced practice nurse.
Amazing, Jan. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Let's please keep them coming in the chat, sharing in the chat. And we are really excited and really happy to be here today, to be sharing this session with all of you. And I just want to thank you all again. I will pass it on to my friend Pedja, and we'll be coming back to several activities throughout the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And I think it's really remarkable. It's good to be seen. I don't know how you feel, but like I hope this exercise that we do every time reminds me of sometimes we would say like the interaction with the health system, you've been seen by a nurse or seen by a doctor. And I feel like there's less of that. And I think that's the reason why we were excited to join the Patient Revolution town hall and to bring some of these skills, because we do believe that people need to be seen to begin with, and then when we are seen, we can kind of like start working with each other and build some things together. So the main question of this session is like, why do we need patients or clinicians to learn community organizing, practice, and activism? And it's something that Sam and I grapple with on an everyday basis. But the main idea is that if you actually look at the problems that we are facing in healthcare, or to that matter, in any other kind of societal problems like climate change or gun violence or other things that are relevant for people, we have solutions. We have the knowledge to address these problems, but somehow they're not happening. They're not, the solutions are not being implemented. They're not being implemented at the pace that we want. And we want to make an argument that it's not that we don't have understanding as human beings what needs to be done. It's something else that is preventing us from doing it. And this is where easily you will get into the question of power. Martin Luther King defined power as the ability to achieve purpose, which is a simple definition. It's not a scary definition. Oh, power is something that, kind of like, oh, they're only reserved for some. But it's like the ability to achieve shared purpose. And when systems and structures are not able to do that, like in the example of healthcare, we're not able, or we are less able to achieve the purpose of care and kindness and support for people, then we know that we have a power issue. But the good thing about power, there's some optimistic news. Usually people feel power, oh, like that's unsolvable. The good thing about power is that power is not permanent. It's something that changes because it's relational. if I have something that you need, who has the power? You can point out, like, if I have something that you need, who has the power? You see some people pointing at me. Okay, yeah, I have the power. If you have something that I need, who has the power? Yeah, exactly. So you see, power doesn't exist without a relationship with each other. So it can be power with. Sometimes we collaborate together and we create new things as a result of that. Or it can be power over, that some people have more power and some people less. And as a result of that, but it's always relational. And because it's relational, it can be changed by using the relational means. So the main question that we are always grappling is, well, how can people exercise power together? And it is by building relationships based on the shared values. And we do believe that, this organization is actually really trying to do that at its core. But there's also another reason why that is possible, is because there are practical skills and practices that you can learn to be able to build even more power to the people, patients, and clinicians in this case. And to be even more optimistic or hopeful about it, there are traditions of doing that people did over time. There's like a civil rights movement, like voting rights movement, like Chicano movement, where one of our colleagues and friend, Professor Marshall Gantz, who is a mentor and a friend who inspired all of this, was part of. Like I was part of the movement in Serbia, like Sam did some stuff in Mexico. So there are like traditions where we can learn how to do that more effectively and also in a better relationship with each other. So this session, think about it as a way to introduce that to all of you. Many of you do have experience with doing that because you're already doing, but maybe this session will provide a little bit of language, how to understand it in a structural way, and then how to potentially pass it to each other. And the first part of kind of like introducing this whole concept to the group is also recognizing that it's grounded in stories. So yes, we said who we are in terms of the executive, I'm executive of that, or a professor at Harvard, but we didn't share the stories why actually this work mattered to us. So I will share mine and then invite Sam to share his. But I was born in Yugoslavia, in a country that doesn't exist anymore. I always joke that I changed 4 countries without moving, actually, four passports without ever have to move. And I grew up in a big family. My father had a lot of siblings, like 6 siblings. So there was always a lot of my childhood was always full of people. We were not rich. We were actually, I learned later, like, in life, that we were a poor family, but rich in love. Like there was another kind of richness that was existing there. And at the age of 7, I remember playing in my grandmother's backyard and, looking for my dad to play with him, got into a house and then saw him across the room sitting on a beige couch, completely white and covered in sweat. And he was whispering, "I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe." I ran out of the house. I got really scared, called my uncle Raka, and he was shouting. I don't remember a lot of things, but I remember him shouting, "We need a doctor, we need a nurse." And for little Pedja, my father had a heart attack. I got really scared. He was saved by the doctors and the nurses that came that day. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years later of another heart attack. But for little Pedja, that connection to become a doctor, to become a nurse, is a way to save your family. But there was also at the same time something else going on in my country. It was the beginning of the Civil War. And, when you're in Civil War, things change pretty quickly. And we can talk about like what was happening and nationalism and all of that was happening in the Balkans at the time. But what struck the note for me was the moment when one of my friends in elementary school, whose dad was Muslim and mom was Serbian, ended up being put in the back of the classroom. I entered the classroom and saw him in the back of the classroom sitting alone, and a classroom bully that we had told me, I was like, "What's happening here?" He said, "He's sitting there and he should be alone and no one should sit next to him." I was looking at my friend and looking at the bully and went back and sit with my friend. The bully came, we got into a fight. It was a fist fight. I got a broken nose and a friend for a lifetime. Also got a really angry mother. My single mom got really, really mad at me. But then my grandmother was laughing. And I look at her and say, like, why are you laughing? I'm in trouble. I ended up in a principal office and kind of like all of that. But she said, like, you're just being one of us. And I asked her, what are you talking about? And she told me a story about her brother who ended up in Mauthausen in Germany in a concentration camp because he didn't want to give up on his Jewish friends. He said, like, if you cannot release them, because my grandfather was kind of negotiating with the Germans, but he said, if you cannot release my Jewish friends, I'm going to stay here. And he ended up in Mauthausen in Germany. So basically, for me, it was really personal to then go and fight against Milosevic, who was a dictator in Serbia, and do activism in HIV/AIDS activism. And honestly, as a doctor, I became a doctor. It was never enough to just stay in the space of doing things one patient at a time. I know some people here who are doctors and clinicians would say like, that's enough. But for me, it was not, because we learned really fast that to live in a dictatorship, you cannot be healthy. If you live in a society or you operate in organizations that are not developed or not created to be kind and to humanize people, you cannot be healthy. And luckily for me, we got a win in 2000. Like the Serbia was liberated, mostly by people power, by young people organizing on the streets and doing protests. And I was part of that movement, and I saw it in action. And then since then, it became the question and a quest, like, how can I bring this to other clinicians, to other patients, because there's something really powerful in people working together. And when you witness that for the first time early on in your life, you just cannot get rid of it. It becomes like, okay, this is the way to operate. But also it becomes really important to see and how we can change the societies and institutions in such a way that can improve things. This is the work that we've been doing with Sam and others through People Power Health. We are training clinicians and patients on different topics like climate change, gun violence, how to be better activists, how to be better organizers. And I find my work really exciting and really hopeful every day when I work with people to enable them to create change. So that is a little bit of my story, and I will pass it on to Sam to share his.
Thank you, Pedja. And if we can just stay there for a moment before we move on, and then I can start. Okay, it's December 1996. It's Christmas time, and we decide that we are visiting my grandpa with my family. As we arrive to his place, and we see like the Christmas music and the food in the table, and we're getting ready for like the gifts and all of that. We noticed that my grandpa is feeling sick, a little bit dizzy. He sits down, and then he suddenly loses his consciousness. He faints, and everyone starts running and looking for a doctor or a nurse in this small rural town in northern Mexico. Finally, like, we cannot find any doctor, any nurse. So my dad takes my grandpa back to the city. And over there, they told us that he had a stroke, that he will be in a bed for the rest of his life. A couple of years later, I am in high school. My grandpa just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I am feeling a little bit sick and a little bit tired myself. I go back home. I told my mom and dad, and they take me to the doctor. We are in the room running some tests in the clinic, and the doctor comes back a few moments later, and he shares with us the news: Sam, you have cancer, and we need to start chemo as soon as possible. In that moment, I started to realize, even when I was 15 years old, that either in a small town or in a big city, there was always this need of having a doctor or a nurse or access to healthcare. So after a year in chemo, I decided that was something that I wanted to be able to help other people with. So I became a doctor myself. And when I was finishing medical school, as I was finishing my medical training, I started to realize that I wanted to do something more outside of the walls of the clinic. So I talked with some friends, and we decided to organize around the need of blood donations in my country, because Mexico is the last place of all of Latin America in blood donation culture. So we started to meet people, to create, like, organize some rallies, and we started to see how people started to accept the reality of the need of blood donations in Mexico. And when I was doing that and finishing those campaigns, I was introduced with Pedja, and we met, and we had the opportunity of developing some new projects. And nowadays, I'm fully convinced that this opportunity of learning, organizing, and sharing these organizing practices with other people can make a real and lasting difference with all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That was amazing. So since we promised you this is going to be an interactive session and not two of us talking, which we've been doing quite a bit, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have learned how to ride a bike? Raise your hand if you know how to ride a bike. Okay, how did you do it? Did you do it by studying psychology, watching YouTube videos, or you did something else? What did you do? Let's say, Heather, you're laughing. What did you do to learn how to ride a bike?
Lots of trial and error.
Lots of trial, like get on a bike. Yeah, Sheila, that's exactly right. Like any practice, organizing is a practice. Like learning how to ride a bike require getting on a bike. So in the next couple of minutes and an hour, we're gonna hopefully give you a chance to get on a bike and not learn the whole practice of organizing, but try to see like what it takes, what it feels to do that. And first practice, we just shared like our own stories. So what we're going to do now, we're going to invite you to go into pairs and meet some people. Maybe you already know them, maybe you don't, but to share stories with each other. So in the next what do we have? Like maybe 10 minutes? Oh yeah, we have 12 minutes actually. That's great. We're going to have pair share. So make sure that both people share their story, like why they're called to do this work. Why do you call to Patient Revolution? And then it's also an exercise in listening, because you will be invited to listen to other people's stories. So as much as you share, it's also more important to listen. So let's do that. We have 12 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then we will come back and move on with the session. And Maggie and Samara, I don't know if there's a way to, yeah.
Yeah, we're opening all the rooms, and no problem, Nicole. We'll figure that out. So hold on one second while we get everybody in a room. Let me see. May make one additional. Somehow I think I'm gonna put you in a room as well. Okay, good. So you moved front. Okay, great.
Let me see. I wasn't offered a room.
Yeah, no, I think you're okay. So we'll leave Nicole here.
Mark and Hope, so.
Yeah, Mark and Hope, if you want to go ahead and join. Oh, I'm in the position as Nicole. Okay, so you guys are together. I'm wondering, are typing. Yeah, let's put, I don't know if does the chat work? If
the chat works in the breakout rooms,
in a group. Okay, Nicole and Hope, I'm going to put y'all in a room together and see if you can kind of do the typing options.
Yeah, wow, that's really creative. Let's see.
Let's see what we can do. Okay. Oh, and then we might need to put Jane in a different one. Okay, and then let's move This is
Maggie,
like,
do you want me to pause the recording?
think I might-
yes, you can pause the recording. Fantastic.
Welcome back. We're gonna wait for just few seconds for everybody to come back because there are a few more seconds before the rooms are closed. Okay. Welcome back. I think now we have everybody. I love to see that the cameras were on during the one-on-one. So if you can keep them on, that will be lovely. So we can see each other. Of course, if that's not appropriate, don't have to. But like it's nicer to see the faces and not the black rectangles. Okay, so let's move on. Sam, do you mind putting a link in the chat? We shared a link to a little parable with you ahead of time, but we also know that life is happening, so maybe people didn't have a chance to read it. So here's it in a chat. If you haven't read it, you'll literally need 2 minutes to read the story. It's a little story about kind of like organizing, and we will have a discussion about it. But those raise your hand if you had a chance to read it, and you know like just to. So those who read it, I was curious about the experience doing the pair share and the stories while others are reading the story. So Brenda, what was your experience doing the introductions to each other in the story model?
Well, it was very connecting. And I'm always very moved by and impressed by the work that so many people are doing, and the really intense personal experience that almost all of us have that motivates us, in the work.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when we kind of like speak in titles, like we actually don't get to know the values of the people. But when we start talking through stories and through our own experience, we connect on a different level. And no matter who you are, no matter what, like everybody has a story to share of their experience, of their their lived experience that can connect with other people no matter what. John, what was your experience? I think I saw your raising the hand where.
Are you talking about this, John?
Yeah, that's right.
I have a new friend in Chicago. Shabina and I, oh my gosh, it's amazing how our stories overlap too, right? So finding common ground happened really fast, and she's brilliant and her story is fascinating. This is her first time with the Patient Revolution. I think she's going to be coming back too. Anyways.
Amazing. So you see that's another thing, like because even if we don't have the same experience, sometimes people were raised in different places or grew up in, but yet somehow we can find commonalities because the human experience is really common in many ways. And thank you for that, John. I think that's a beautiful reflection on what usually happens in these moments. Okay, so hopefully many of you now had a chance to read the story of the rock. We're gonna put a little picture here. There's a rock here just to remind us of what the story is about. But I want to ask a question to the group. What have you learned about community organizing by reading that parable? What have you learned about, okay, what it means to organize people by reading that parable? And if you laughed at some points during the reading the story, that's also fine. What have you learned? Any thoughts are welcome. There's no right or wrong answers here. Go ahead, Reshma.
I've learned not to outsource it.
Oh, interesting. Tell us more. Tell us more about it. What not to outsource power, not to outsource
not to outsource the work. If you do the work, you're enlightened and empowered. When people do a lot of copy pasting, that's our culture now. You're not really using this, and when you don't use that, that goes away. So using your God-given skills and gifts and everything to address the solution. So the first one was really funny. The first people who did all the advertising and everything else. So that got me going. I'm like, I'm not outsourcing my work, I'm doing it, and I'm getting empowered and changed as a result. A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah.
What doesn't kill you makes you more powerful, it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And that is the resilience and the human spirit that I have seen, even though life was very challenging at certain points.
Yeah.
It's grown me.
Yeah.
So
That's really well said. And it's not just like individual, but also the community power that is building through that. And it's such an interesting thing what you said about outsourcing. I love that. I haven't heard that framework, but we're gonna definitely use it. When you outsource kind of like power, your source of power, you actually kind of like miss an opportunity to do it together with other people and to learn together. And the other important lesson that you're bringing is that every time you do community organizing, it's highly contextualized. It cannot be just replicated from one place to another. And I think Patient Revolution is an example of that, where, bringing human and kind care to people will depend on where you are. It's not a one size fit all, but it is about grounding it in people, grounding in their capacities, and not outsourcing it, as you said. What else people learn through this? Like, what did you learn from reading this short parable? Feel free to just unmute and speak.
I'd offer, Pedja, that first there was a clarity about the challenge that this community had, right?
Huh?
So and it made them feel powerless. So there's something I call a burning platform, right? There was something to focus energy on. And then they talked and they tried again, right? It wasn't one and done. They stayed together. They continued to work together too. So there's a couple of those elements that I think are really important in terms of organizing
Yeah.
people, right? To achieve what? Well, here they had a need, a burning platform, and there was a focus on how to solve it. And even that, it was still took a couple of whacks to figure out how to figure out the solutions.
Yeah. I love that, John, because we use the metaphor of the rock, and sometimes people would say, but what if we don't know what the rock is?
Ooh, yeah.
And that is real. Like, let's
Mhm.
face it, like it happening a lot of time that you have these problems that are happening and repeating in society, but you don't know where to start. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the session. For what you're saying is that sometimes even recognizing what the rock is that needs to be moved is an amazing step forward, because then as a community you can learn and you can figure out like, okay, what do we need to do in order to build our capacity to do that? But I really kind of like, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it is such an powerful thing, but also like something as an organizer you have to think about. How our people can understand what is the rock in front of us that we need to move. What else? Heather or Jenny, I see like nods, so I'm just curious. Oh, Frank, we have your hands. Go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't really metabolized the story yet, but I think the thing that's really compelling right here is this is North Carolina, right? Rocks in the road. And we've got a real world example of people who are going to be isolated and people who are going to have to find their own community, their own resources, independent of the outside world. So this is very compelling right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of relying on the power that you have, that people have, and if you think about the mindsets that organizers or activists have, you always, sometimes out of necessity, like when I think about my own example of organizing in Serbia, it's not that we didn't want to cooperate with other people around the world. It was that we were under UN sanctions and there was no way for us to actually exit that situation, like physically exit the country. But there was a way for us to build power so we can exit like together, and build a democracy. And that was really interesting because we were turned to each other and our relationships, because there was a rock, and rock was in our case Milosevic and what was happening with him. But there could be other rocks and other ways to do it. But relying on each other, being kind of like recognizing that relational power is really enormous, if it's recognized and we start seeing each other as a relationship, as power, then it becomes really really motivating for people. So thank you for that. That is a beautiful comment. Let's hear one more before we move on. What else did you learn? Go ahead, Queen.
Quinn, you
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Reading that story and actually hearing everyone's perspective on it made me realize that oftentimes the value of this is you kind of see people gathering in front of the rock before the rock so that you all acknowledge the problem. But oftentimes in healthcare, people are extraordinarily isolated and they're doing this, on their own at 3 a.m. So they don't have the benefits of being validated with other people. So they're facing that rock by themselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because that's reality. The reality is that, this is a beautiful story. We always ask people like, okay, you read this story, and I'm going to ask it in a question. But I assume, at least when I read it the first time and I was thinking about it, there's a but in your head. There's kind of like, oh, yes, this is all nice, but it doesn't work that way. And the reality, one of the realities is exactly what you're sharing, is that especially in healthcare, we see a lot of lone wolfism, as we call it, like people working alone to kind of push the rock when the work is not to be done alone. It's not even possible. But there's another problem, is the structures that we are living in healthcare, both for the patients and clinicians and others, are built to keep us isolated. So in a way, as you're saying, it's not that we want to do this work alone, but we don't even have an opportunity to do it with other people. And maybe the first step that we need to do is to create opportunities for that. I know that Bill is here, and I'm really an admirer of his work in many ways. But I remember, Bill, in some of the work that you did, you first created that opportunity for clinicians and patients to be with each other, so they can start looking at each other and building those relationships. And that was a genius and revolution, if you want to put it that way, of what you did. Bill, do you want to share a little bit about that? Well, those are things that I remember from a long time ago.
And so we're talking about the work that we did in the patient revolution.
No, the clinic stuff, like way before.
Yeah, the Right Care Alliance stuff.
Yes, yeah.
It was sort of a patient revolution without the name of the patient revolution, but we brought physicians and patients together because we found an awful lot of common ground, that neither patients nor physicians were happy with the system we found ourselves in, and patients couldn't find their way out and physicians couldn't find their way out. So we began working together to find a common way out of the system we all felt trapped in.
Yeah. No, it's and that is sometimes the first step, to actually create, as Quinn was asking, like to create the space for people to see each other and start working with each other. But no matter what you do, there are a couple of kind of like principles that can kind of like you can embed in this. The first one is, the first question is not what is the issue, it's who are the people. And as Bill just pointed out, when you ask that question, you would start recognizing, oh, the people are clinicians and patients who are not happy with what's happening and what is. And if you answer that question, then organizing becomes a little easier. Not easy. Working with people is never easy, but easier, because at least you will know who are you working with. Who are the people that need to be in a relationship in order to create change. And change is not the change that you want, is the change that they've experienced. And that's why what John was pointing out, the understanding of what the rock is, not for you, because sometimes as academics or intellectuals or even like doctors and nurses, we can think we know what the patient needs, or we know what the problem is, what is their rock. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about recognizing who are the people and working with them to define what is their rock, what is the thing that they can feel compelled to move and change. And then the beautiful thing about organizing is figuring out how, now that we know the answers to these two questions, who are the people and what is the change, how we can build power together in a relational way to address that change. So if you think about the algorithm for organizing, it always starts with a question, who are my people? Then what is the change that they need, not what I need, but what they need, and then how we can build the power together, which is the most creative part of the work. Usually what you will encounter, this is the reality, is disorganized communities. You know, the groups of people where there's a problem, but people feel apathy, division, sense of drift, reaction, inertia, things were always been like this and they always going to stay the same. Have you ever been part of that kind of group? Like, you know, I don't know, I've been many times where that's the beginning. That's always the beginning. But then there's another side of that when there's a little hope and you feel like the group has a sense of purpose, motivation, unity, initiative, and change. And there's a secret. How do you do that? How do you transfer this from one thing to another? Well, it's not a secret. I'm going to reveal it in a second. But it goes to the idea of leadership. You know, that actually these things are not, you know, my good friend Sergej Popovic, who was leading the revolution in Serbia, he would say like there are two types of revolutions, spontaneous and successful. And he was in like making the point that whenever you think that things will just happen, that's not how it is. Rosa Parks was not an old lady that one day decided to stay on the bus. She was an NAACP organizer, trained in organizing. That was part of their strategy, so they can file a lawsuit in order to replicate Brown versus Board of Education and get the buses desegregated. Along the way, they've learned that boycott is actually a much more powerful way to deal with that. But it was not that happened by accident. So if you think about these skills, these are the practices that can help you do that are, first of all, telling stories and building narratives, allowing people to share stories, building relationships, building teams, then having strategy, and then taking action. And let me ask you a question. So what leadership practices did we already start to build today? Because these are the practices, you kind of do them. There's a hint on the slide, but what did we already do in this session? A little bit of that. Like, what do you think?
Storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah. We started narrative, we started storytelling, but we also did it in pairs. So we started a little bit of relationship building. So you kind of already practiced out of these 5 practices how to organize. One of them being storytelling and sharing each other's stories and creating spaces for that. And the other is building relationships. Of course, when we train people, like we will go deeper in these skills and train them how to do that. And Sheila and Victor and other were part of the Leading Change Network trainings. But we wanted to give you a taste of that. So now with that, we also want to give you a taste of what it means to work in teams and what it means to strategize together. So we created a little scenario for you. And Sam, if you can lead us through this, and maybe we can kind of like invite people to read out loud so we can kind of like all get grounded in a scenario.
Of course, Pedja, thank you. So this is our scenario for today. I also shared it in the chat a moment ago. And I would like to ask someone that could share their voice with us. So is there anyone that would like to volunteer and share with your voice? Please just raise your hand and we would love to hear the scenario with some of your lovely voices. Otherwise, I can just choose one person from the room, but if someone wants to volunteer, that will be amazing. Okay, Ron, please.
Hi, sorry for being late, but I was collecting stories before I got on. Scenario 2024. In your town, healthcare is accessible, but feels increasingly cold and transactional. The clinic, though efficient, offers quick, impersonal visits, and the hospital's focus seems to be on numbers, not people. Patients often leave without feeling truly heard, and many staff members are stretched thin, unable to provide the kind of thoughtful care they wish they could. One day, Mrs. Johnson, a beloved elderly community member, shares with a patient advocate that during her recent visit, she felt rushed and unheard while discussing her new health concern. She left with more anxiety than reassurance. This story resonates with many in the community, patients and clinicians alike, who feel that healthcare is becoming more about procedures than personal connection. Some patients begin to quietly discuss their shared frustrations at a local diner. And a few clinicians who are equally concerned express the need for a more humane approach.
Thank you, Ron. And let's just think for a moment that we are in that moment, in that space, listening to this, feeling this, and being in that space. Pedja will guide us in the next few slides.
Thanks, Sam, and thank you for what a beautiful read. That was really nice to hear. So when you encounter this situation, usually what people like in organizing, even if you have relationships, as you can see, like people start building relationships here, but you gonna encounter the main question of strategy, which is where should we start? What do we do? What is like, if the purpose of this session is to kind of like teach you how to think like an organizer, there's something really important what we call like winnable goal, like a first strategic goal. Where should we start? Like in Montgomery bus boycott that I've just mentioned, it was not by accident they started by buses. It was a strategic choice to start the process of actually facing and dealing with racism, institutional racism, and the specific thing that was real for them. Why do you think why do you think the civil rights movement started with buses? What are your ideas? Why do you think it didn't start it somewhere else, but actually focused on the buses first? At the very, well, not first, but like one of the first things that they did.
It's very visible and tangible to many people in the community.
Exactly. It's visible and tangible, and it's part of everyday experience of human beings. If you think about everyday experience of the Black people in the South during that time, you have to, like, nobody else was using the buses to begin with. But then you have to get on a bus, go through the whole bus, sit in the back if there's space. If there's not enough space, somebody whites come in and you have to stand up and give them your place. And it was happening on an everyday basis. So it was easy to understand that movement was looking for something that is part of everyday experience. So that is the idea of winnable goal. It's not just like you can win it, which is also important because that's how you build the momentum, but it's also part of the everyday experience of the people. So when you are organizing, when you think about an organizer, you start thinking like, what is the everyday experience of the people that is an expression of the bigger problem that we are trying to tackle? When we were in Serbia organizing to fight corruption in healthcare after the democratic changes, we didn't want to start with all the corruption that was existing. There was a lot of corruption on different levels. We started on a corruption where doctors and nurses were, some of them, like really small minority of them, were taking bribes from the patients. Because again, that was an everyday experience, not just of patients going through that. Some of them did. But mostly the colleagues who were not corrupted, they had to see their profession being labeled as corrupted as a result of those small amount of bad apples working in a system. So again, everyday experience of them having to go back to their kids and their partners and say like, I'm not that kind of doctor, I'm not that kind of nurse. And that was the first winnable goal that we could move and work around. So once you have the winnable goal, then the main question is like, what are the resources that our people have that we can use to advance and deal with this? And that is such an important question that people forget. You start imagining the future, oh, we're going to change the world, all of that. But you don't ask the question, what are the resources that we have that can help us actually enable that future? And going back to the bus boycott, like what was the resource that they had? What do you think was the resource that they had in that particular case?
Labor.
Labor?
I mean, well, sorry, they were actioning their collective labor power too.
Yeah, or if you make it even more simple, they had their feet. You know, they can walk. And guess what? Like most of the people have ability to do that. And if they didn't, like there were a community support that you can use to build off that, like carpooling and stuff like that. But it was the resource that was grounded in the community. So once you have the idea, okay, this is a winnable goal that we can take on, something that is possible, then the next question is like, what are the resources that we have? And then how the strategy is the work of how do we turn the resources that we have into what we need to achieve what we want. It's kind of like as simple as that. Although there are like McKinsey and other consultants that are trying to sell us the strategy for a couple of millions of dollars or whatnot. But guess what? Human beings, we do the strategy all the time. How many of you strategized, this morning about something? I don't know about you, but I was trying to figure out how to be in this space, how to get everything. Like we do it all the time. It's not a big thing. Human beings, we're strategizing machines. Oh, what do I need to wear? How do I get to work? And then we're also good in dealing with things that are happening, that are changing as we're doing that work. But it's important to recognize the strategy without, this is a famous quote by Sun Tzu, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise before the defeat. Sometimes we get stuck in this idea that, oh, we just do action. It doesn't really matter what we do. No, it does matter, because without strategy, we will just be noise before the defeat. But if you don't have the tactics to implement the strategy or actions to take, it's harder to imagine that could happen. And these are just some of the examples how tactics can get creative. Like, I love these because they're really kind of like inspiring. The tactics to achieve something can be different. Like, about the potholes, for example, like, the famous one from Russia, mayor is a hole, and like you do a tactic like that, and everybody gets excited, and then the mayor didn't know what to do with this, and eventually they fixed the potholes, like because that was the only way to get rid of this. Or in Panama, where they put this machine that every time in a pothole, that every time a car goes over it, it will tweet and kind of like send a DM message to the mayor about kind of like, and the administration was overwhelmed with the numbers of tweets and stuff that was getting from these things, and they had to react. Or in Serbia, this is one where the people kind of like planted the flowers in the potholes to avoid. But you see how this whole thing, it's a little silly, and you think, oh, this is silly, this is not. But guess what? People love this type of contradictions, because when people see them, they would say like, oh, this is exciting, this is fun, this is bring joy to the pain that we are experiencing every day running our cars over those potholes. So it doesn't have to be that it's always serious. It can be something funny and exciting, but really serious in terms of the outcomes, because all of these tactics actually ended up in finding the solution or defining the problem. But you see how this works. Like you have the strategy and you have tactics that are working with each other, in order to do some of these things. So what we're going to do now is give you a chance. Remember our scenario, like it was a long time ago, to give you a chance, like to engage with that scenario in a team, in a group of people. We're going to put you in the teams of 5, and it's not going to be ideal, and you only have 10 minutes. So don't get stressed about it. This is not an exercise in perfection, but try to think about, what can be the first of all, what are the resources that you hold as a group in the context of this scenario potentially? And since in an imaginary scenario, you can be yourself in that scenario. Let's imagine that you're living in that town, and whatever resources you think you can bring to the game, bring them on, and then start thinking like, with those resources, what is the first thing that we can do to address this issue of industrialization and dehumanization of healthcare? What can we do? What can be the first step towards that? How is it grounded in our experience? How can we actually tackle that problem? Like, what would be the first thing to do regarding that? It's going to get frustrating, I know, because people say like, if we knew that, we will solve it. But that's okay. The more important is for you to have a conversation together about what could that, and start thinking like an organizer. What can be that first winnable goal? How is that goal grounded in resources that we have? And then if you have time, only if you have time, you can start talking about like what creative tactics we can do. And when I say creative, try to be like, give yourself a credit to do something, maybe outside of the box, like the potholes examples. Like pick something that could be a little outside of the usual. Oh, let's do a meeting, let's do a conversation with the CEO or something like that. Again, it doesn't have to be real. This is just an exercise, so don't worry about being perfect, and have fun. Honestly, that's the whole point. So let's go into the 10 minutes. It's gonna fly by really fast. But try to have a conversation and not spend too much time introducing everybody at the beginning, because we've seen these groups, like you can do a short introduction, just say the name, but if you start everybody introduce who they are and whatnot, which you will usually do in the work, it's not going to work in these 10 minutes that you have to kind of get to some of these answers. So let's do that, and when we come back, we're going to debrief the whole experience.
Awesome. Okay, I'm opening the rooms, and enjoy your 10 minutes, everyone.
Recording.
Okay, so we are starting to see people coming back into the room, and let's just wait a moment, a couple of seconds for people to be here present, and we can start with our debrief. Okay, welcome everyone. I think it's just 3 seconds, 2 seconds.
I mean, everyone's
Right.
saying they don't want to leave voluntarily. They waited till the clock ran out.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining back to the main room. Okay, so let's start our debrief from this teamwork activity. And I see people smiling and I see people nodding. So I can imagine this amazing 10 minutes and conversation that you all had. So yeah, of course, 10 minutes was not enough. We knew that could be an issue, but let's do our best, and let's go back to those 3 questions. So which team could share with us a little bit about their discussion? I will just love to hear some voices here. Let's see. Maybe Reshma, could you share a little bit with us about how was the conversation in your team?
Well, I got to give you guys credit because you said do a speed fire introduction. So we got that done. We came up with an idea of strategizing introductions and say who's got what strengths. So everybody came up with 1 or 2 words. So we knew where we are all coming from. That got it started. And then we took your questions and we went down the list. So there was a good discussion happening, what resources we have. We talked about the resource was the provider, as well as find out more information about what Mrs. Johnson is experiencing. So we can figure out themes. And once you got to the themes, then, you can address it. And we said things like, the provider and the patient are both humans. The provider also can be a patient when they have to go for their well visits and sick visits. So there's something common there. And then we were discussing tactics before we got pulled out. There was a suggestion of, how do we maximize the time we have and make it more efficient? And then another person said, well, if you put that burden just on the patient, then the system doesn't change. And then, of course, we were taken by the Star Trek mode back into the main room. So that's where we left off.
Okay, thank you, amazing. Thank you, Reshma. Okay, who else could share with us about their experience in the room, and if there was any specific action, next step that the people discussed? Shayla, please.
I thought one really powerful suggestion from ours was, it was actually two people said something that was overlapping, which is we talked about helping patients in particular find their voice and recognize they have agency. And if we help people collectively share their expectations for what it should be, the system will have to respond. And along with that, in order to find your voice, I think people often sort of gloss over their story, but teaching them and providing the skills about how to share the minute detail of that experience is a better way to capture people's imaginations about what went right or what went wrong.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. Absolutely. Details are key when we are working together. Let's see, Queen, could you please share what you see in the chat?
Sure. So the problem was she didn't feel heard, and that apparently resonated with the other patients and clinicians at the diner. And so the thought was, this brilliant idea of the ridiculous of putting on giant paper mache ears like during clinic when you don't feel like you're being heard, and that making the clinician stop and pause a little bit and inquire. And the thought was, in terms of reach, it's like rather than putting a poster up in clinic where you're dependent upon really stretched clinicians to put something up, you can just leverage the power of 21st century social media, where people put on the fake ears, take pictures of themselves and share, and that could be a viral behavior.
Amazing. I love that tactic, that specific thing. Okay, amazing. Okay, one more team. I would love to hear one more team, and then we will move on to the key takeaways from the whole session. Who would like to share? Let's see here, John.
Sure. Ours really, our resource or our primary resource we talked about is our stories, our own personal stories and shared stories. And those happen to be a full spectrum of where compassionate care was not provided to where compassionate, empathetic care was really well provided to, and being aware of the power of those. And we talked a little bit about, boy, but is that enough? Is that enough? And we all agreed, yes, that's a lot and that's enough. And keep telling your stories. As far as resources I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you, Jan.
You bet.
Thank you. Okay, amazing. So, well, we had this space, and thank you to all the teams for being able to share. Okay, I'm just seeing in the chat we have one question from Victor. Victor, could you read your question, please?
Yeah, in our group there was a trend that was okay, but where there was the idea that, oh, I could do this with my clinician, or when I call, I might be able to get this done. So the personal advocacy and the personal ability to mobilize one's own power versus what can we do with so I presume this happens immediately because I think we have I don't know if you want to call it a neoliberal brain, but where the question is usually what can I do instead of asking the question what can we do. So can you help us with that a little bit?
Yes, I would like to ask you, what do you think about that? So what do you think about how to discover that collective voice? Yeah, you, Victor. What
You're
do
asking
you?
me? Well, that I think that it's hard. I mean, we don't have a practice of
Exactly.
of thinking as we've been encouraged to towards self-reliance and and when people talk about change, we are pushed towards self-advocacy, and that seems to be like the only avenue, which then of course leaves the system exactly unchanged for those who cannot advocate for themselves, so that it doesn't really produce change for anyone else, and in fact may have unintended consequences to other folks if we get what we want just for ourselves.
Exactly. And one thing that we share sometimes, and I'm closing with this, is that we usually are move toward a lone wolf idea of me as an individual and me as a hero kind of role. But when we start opening these conversations and when we start finding our people and we start creating these relationships and building these teams, that allows us to find those shared values and those shared goals. and allow us to move in that direction. So that's definitely one thing that we want to do. And as we close this session, I want to ask people, what is one key takeaway that we are taking from this session? We have still 3-4 minutes, so I would love to ask people, what is one key takeaway that you are taking out from this session? Please, purpose. Okay, Janice, can you share a little bit more about what's that word meaning?
Purpose to me means that there's a reason for what we're doing, and it motivates us. Just the term itself, I feel, really opens up, opportunities, windows, doors, whatever you want to say, for us to accept ways that we can make change.
Thank you. Reshma, can you please share about your key takeaway?
I think finding community, just like what we're doing right now, and having a collective conversation and assessing collective action.
Amazing. Yes, absolutely. Queen, your question is if there is a shared space.
Well, we have some options and we'll figure out a way to make this happen. So we'll follow up after this, sending the video and the slides, and we'll make sure that you're able to connect with the people who participated today.
Yes, absolutely. And if I may briefly, there's always the opportunity of connecting both with the Leading Change Network or with People Power Health. We have some spaces available that people can connect with each other and can find some amazing resources. So that's definitely there. Sabina, please.
I would like to be more hands-on and active community member. Just not a number or a person with different ethnics. So I want to spread the word. So I would really like to get involved hand on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. That's amazing. And we will definitely, through Maggie and the team, we will be reaching out. Okay, so those are amazing key learnings. Thank you, everyone. And I see in the chat, there are more key takeaways and more questions about how to keep in touch, how to stay in touch. And then we can move on. These are our 5 leadership skills, and this is our newsletter. So please, we have a QR code. If you want to be connected with us, we have our LinkedIn page. We also have our newsletter, our monthly newsletter, where we share some amazing interviews with some guest speakers. We also share articles. We also share some case studies and about some of the campaigns and the experiences that we have been able to connect with throughout the last few years and even in more recent months. So this is an amazing opportunity to connect with all of you. We really just want to thank you, because having these spaces, they are really important. They are really valuable because it allows us to connect with each other, to find our people who are spread throughout the country, throughout the world. So we are really excited because we were invited by the Patient Revolution team to this town hall. So I would just like to ask Maggie, Samhar, or Pedja, if you want to share one last thought in our last minute.
Thank you so much, Pedja and Sam. This was incredibly inspiring for me and for obviously everyone on the call today. Samhar has put some links in the chat. We'd love your feedback. And if you have suggestions for other town halls, we'd love to hear those as well. If you'd like to get more involved with Patient Revolution, you can check out our website. And also we have a course called Foundations of Care that's available to everyone. And we have cohorts starting on Monday and another one in November. So please.
Reshma leading the cohort.
And Reshma, yes, Reshma is one of our facilitators. So feeling incredibly inspired and hopeful. And so thank you all for spending the time with us today and for being a part of the Patient Revolution community. And thanks again to Sam and Pedja.
Thank you all.